Hey there, Javi here with BorrowLenses.com, and today we're going to talk about how to balance a 3-axis gimbal. Gimbals are not new to the filmmaking industry. Players like Steadicam dominated the market and became the industry standard for camera stabilization. These gimbals rely on inertia and spring arms to isolate your movement and give you a smoother shot. Later on, electronic gimbals came onto the scene, being used mainly in drones and large helicopter setups to stabilize movement. In 2013, Freefly released the very first handheld electronic gimbal, revolutionizing the industry and ushering a new age of stabilization. 3-axis electronic gimbals use motors on the pan, roll, and tilt axis to counteract your movement and keep your camera steady. Since 2013, there's been an explosion of new gimbals coming into the market every year, with names like DJI and Zhuyun crane making their own electronic gimbals. Now that gimbals are getting cheaper and more accessible, it's pretty easy to get stable footage for your project. The one thing all gimbals rely on is proper balance in order to make it easy to stabilize. The point of balancing is to put your payload's center of gravity dead center to the gimbals so that the gimbal's motors work the least amount possible to correct your movement. Today, we're going to show you how to balance a gimbal using the DJI Ronin-S. Regardless of what electronic gimbal you have on your hand, the fundamentals are essentially the same. The first thing you want to do is to build your camera up in the most stripped down way possible. The less you have on the camera, the easier it is going to be to balance. You're going to want to put your media, batteries, and accessories like monitors, power cables, and focus motors on your cameras before you start. Everything from a micro SD card to an HDMI cable is going to affect your balance, and if you add them after going through all these steps, you're going to have to start from the beginning. Next, you're going to want to attach your camera plate and mount it onto the gimbal. Now it's time to balance. Since you're trying to balance 3 axes at the same time, this process is going to be less about getting it right the first time and more about doing the next 3 steps a couple of times until you end up on the center of gravity. First, balance the tilt axis by sliding the camera plate back and forth until your camera doesn't tilt forward or back. Since we haven't done the other 2 axes yet, this might be a little tricky, but remember, we're going to go over it again to really dial it in. Next, you're going to want to balance your roll axis. Slide the carriage left or right to get the horizon level on your camera. On some gimbals, like this one, there are 2 places where you can adjust your roll axis. Don't worry too much about using one versus the other, as long as you get it where it doesn't roll to either side. Now we're going to want to balance on this up and down adjustment, which will help us get closer to a perfect balance. Have your lens point up and slide the whole camera up or down until the lens pointing up stays straight without tilting back or forth. Now when we come back to center, we see that it's still a little off. That is because by changing the up and down balance, we've shifted the center of gravity. Let's do those previous 2 steps again. Balancing tilt by sliding the plate forward and back, and then again sliding the carriage left or right until it is level. It should be easier the second time around because we've already gotten closer to that center of gravity. Now lastly, you want to balance the pan axis, which corresponds to this motor right here. The easiest way to do that is to tilt the entire gimbal to one side. Here we see how it is swinging over as we tilt. If the axis was balanced, the camera would stay pointing in the same direction, even when we tilt. Now we have to slide the entire gimbal off of this axis to find where it will stay put. This one requires some trial and error as well, so feel free to keep testing and adjusting until you get it right. And there you have it, a balanced gimbal. Now, we aren't done yet. The last step is to go into your gimbal's app and dial in the motor settings to work best for your specific payload. Most of these gimbals will have an auto-tune feature that will set your motor settings for you. Now don't worry if you hear some loud whirring noises when auto-tuning. This feature will vibrate each motor individually in order to measure the weight of your camera setup on each axis and adjust the motor strength accordingly. You're now essentially ready to go. There are a lot more settings that you can dial in on the app, like which axis to lock, or how much you can feather your movements when operating. This will rely on how you plan to operate the gimbal and what kind of shots you're trying to get. Feel free to test these settings out to figure out which setup is best for your operating style. Lastly, some pointers and best practices. Make sure to avoid lenses that telescope out when you zoom, since that will change the camera's center of gravity and cause you to have to rebalance. Also make sure to rebalance when swapping to a different lens. Different lenses have different weights and dimensions, and you want to make sure to optimize your gimbal for every specific payload. In a pinch, you can get away without rebalancing if the lenses are similarly sized and shaped, but it'll affect how well the gimbal stabilizes your movements. So there you have it, a quick primer on balancing gimbals. Regardless of what 3-axis electronic gimbal you're using, the concepts behind balancing remain the same. There may be different features to each gimbal, like top and bottom plates or locks for individual axes that will make balancing a little bit easier, but the fundamentals are gonna stay the same. Got a question? Drop it in the comments below, and if you wanna try any of these gimbals out for yourself, you can get your hands on them at borrowlenses.com. Thanks for watching.